Life's too short to drive boring cars. With record car prices all around us, some people just don't want to spend the big dollars that you'll find typically associated with these beautiful luxury cars. Some people just want a cheaper car. Why? Because they're affordable. Maybe they just want to buy it for their kids. Maybe they just want to beat the winter. Or maybe they just want guiltless transportation. The beauty is there's some great and amazing cars under $5,000 on the market today that you can buy and really not worry about too many issues. But sadly, there's a host of garbage vehicles that you definitely don't want to touch with a 10.5-foot pole. And I'm going to share a list of 5 of some of the worst used cars under $5,000 you don't even want to think about. Let's get into it now. So the first car on my list is the wonderful and glorious Mercedes brand C-Class, but the W203 model like we see here, they started in the early 2000 model years. And Mercedes has always been a leader in luxury, innovation, and as well in performance in some cases, certainly known across the globe. And they've built a lot of great vehicles over the years, but these particular cars aren't some of the better ones. But let's talk about some of these issues with these cars after we do a quick walk around. But let's take a quick look around and talk about specifically the W203 because you can get these now for under $5,000 in some circumstances. But let's take a look. Right there, you'll notice it has that style triangular taillight and it has some great little trim. You'll notice beautiful little chrome trim around the edges. Cheap plastic handles though, and that's precursor to the rest of the car. As you'll see, there's a lot of use of excessive amounts of cheap plastic. It does have a sunroof on it, and some great little moldings along the side, and it does have some great alloy wheels. But it's the front that kind of gives it away. You'll notice this particular model has these round style headlights. That's a dead giveaway. But it does have the Mercedes grille as well as the logo. And what about the interior? It definitely feels slightly luxurious. Well, what's the problem with these? If you can get these so cheap and it's a Mercedes, like you see here, why would you not buy one? Well, because it's a luxury vehicle to start with, and because labor rates and parts are aligned with Mercedes as a brand. But it goes beyond that. It's also not particularly reliable, and the quality, the fit and finish, and the cosmetics isn't that great either. For example, right there you'll notice these vehicles get rust very early on, and you'll see the rust along the bottom edges of the doors. You'll also see rust, like you see it starting to brew right there along the fender and the bumper edge, sometimes around the gas cap filler. And they generally just don't hold up all that well and fight off rust. But there's a lot of problems why you probably don't want to buy one of these. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine had one, but he's a mechanic. So he got it on a song and a dance, but even he had to admit he had to rebuild the engine and had to drive around with a rust bucket for years. But you want some examples outside of rust? Broken stepper motor in the dash starts to click and tick and make noises. Crankshaft sensor, which either causes poor running or the vehicle just won't start. The fit and finish, like door handles on the outside and the inside, start to delaminate. Some of the materials just start coming apart because they're not well made. Worn sway bar links in the suspension starts causing knocking and banging in the front end. You'll notice that. Stands out like a sore thumb. Certainly not what you'd expect from a Mercedes in terms of ride quality, right? Frequent spark plug failures. Power seat control modules cause the batteries to prematurely fail. The old CD changers in these vehicles also just stop working. They become more of a nuisance than anything else. Transmission control modules start to fail because potential oil leaks, resulting in slipping or not running at all. And some moisture often gets down into the heater box as a result of buildup of leaves. You wind up with mildew, stench, and just an outright nasty place to live. As wonderful as it might seem to own a used Mercedes for cheap, it's just going to cost you an arm and a leg, and you're better off avoiding this, regardless if you can find one for under $5,000. And the next one on my list that you don't want to buy under $5,000, it seems like a deal until you own one, and it's the Mazda RX-8 right here. Now, sadly, they got rid of the RX-7 back in 2002, and they replaced it with this. And even with all the popularity of the FD series of RX-7 and the ferocious performance, the RX-8, like we see here, just didn't quite live up to the same level. But here we are, the Mazda RX-8. Let's take a quick look. First of all, they have these very cool fender flares. They look very strong. Don't know what happened there. Washed out headlights, but they have some great rims. And you'll notice they have these awesome little vents there. And you have a set of doors. These open conventionally, and those are suicide doors. And they have these great taillights, but sadly they can fill up with water. However, you got one pipe and two pipes there. And there's definitely a feel of Mazda Miata or the MX-5 at the back end of this vehicle. Now, if you look down here, rust was one of the problems, but believe me, it was a lot worse than just rust. These vehicles had a whole list of issues. For example, misfires, excessive oil consumption, because the apex seals would let go. Also, because the apex seals would get weak, that usually resulted in low compression. Low compression means poor to start. The starter motor was weak, it cranked very slowly, but with low compression to boot, these vehicles often became almost impossible to start on a good day. That usually meant that this thing was on its last legs. And while the twin rotor engine isn't the most expensive to rebuild, the fact of the matter is, on a good day, if you treated it right, did frequent oil changes before every 5,000 kilometers, and you gave it the odd red line blip weekly, you might get it up to 80, 90, or 100,000 miles. The point of the matter is, these cars don't last. But what about the interior? Well, they look a little bit on the cheapish side, but there's a little bit of style there as well. So unfortunately, it's just not one that you ever want to buy, and often it seems like the popular choice for young buyers. Sporty, attractive, high revving, it has all the ingredients until you have to start shelling out the bucks to fix this thing. Now, another one that I wouldn't particularly recommend is the Hyundai Tiburon. Now, that's from a time when Hyundai and Kia were still ramping up. A lot of their products were still mediocre in quality, and while it's not the most unreliable vehicle, the fact of the matter is the miles are getting up there, and there were a few problem areas. I mean, they were relatively affordable. You can either get a 4-banger or a 2.7-liter V6 that made it just over 170 horsepower, and that's why these cars were quite popular. The only fortunate part is they were relatively affordable to fix, and there's a few problems here. But let's look around first. Rust is one. This awkward set of stripes there, I'm not sure what they were thinking there, but you do have a sunroof and an interior that was actually better than many in its class. But with a little wing and some aftermarket wheels, these cars were made to look relatively sporty. 1 and 2 exhaust tips make it look very sharp from the back. And the little Tiburon right there by Hyundai. They've got these great little see-through lenses and this interesting little gas filler right there. But you'll notice low budget, as well as pretty standard fare, and certainly in line with the rest of the car and the pricing that you could get these at. But there was a few issues. TCU and software updates for the automatic transmission were a common issue, and the big one was weak clutches on these vehicles. Clutches were a problem, and you found yourself replacing them quite regularly. So drivetrain was certainly the weakest component of this vehicle. Now, while the electrics weren't all that bad, fundamental mechanical components could leave you stranded. And the next one is one of my tried and true, and it's the BMW 5 Series. Now, of course, it's a premium luxury car when it's new, and they're quite expensive. So you've got to expect labor and parts to be very expensive later on. But here's an example of one specifically you don't want to buy. Now, here what I see is this one's got 167,000 kilometers, about 100,000 miles, and they're asking about 12 grand. But I have seen these outfitted for closer to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in Canadian funds. So if you look around, but beware, these are cars under 5 grand that I could never ever recommend for anybody on a budget. But let's take a look here. We've got the 5 Series. You see this E60 generation have this curled over headlight. This is the generation that I'm talking, and it's from the mid 2000s all the way up to about 2010. They got great things. You've got headlight washers, a nice profile as you stroke down the side of the vehicle. You'll see nice flare there. Gives it a sporting look, and around the Bengal butt here you'll see, because this was in fact designed by Chris Bengal. Many people like these taillights, many people don't. And you'll notice we've got the dual exhaust only on one side, but this is the 535xi, and that's where things get ugly and interesting. Now the XI makes it all-wheel drive, so it's great in snow and ice. And as I said already, 5 Series cars are always going to be a little more expensive even than their brothers, the 3 Series cars. And the interiors are quite nice too. They're well made, and they definitely hold up well to wear and tear. They do come with a sunroof and virtually every other luxury amenity that BMW offered in the day. But as I pointed out, that has the 35. So what that means is it's got the N54 twin turbo 6-cylinder engine, makes about 300 horsepower. Yikes. I had a 335 once with the same engine, and let me tell you, it's a mess. They're fun, they're fast when they're running well, but the problem is this early generation twin turbo engine has all kinds of problems, from wastegate rattle, and it's a big job to get the wastegates out. The high pressure fuel pump is a common issue, and they are expensive. Now there's an extended warranty by BMW because it was a fault, but it's a problem. The high pressure fuel injectors are also a problem area. Turbos can wear, but it's the thermostat and water pump that are buried under here that you have to remove, steering rack and all kinds of other hardware just to get at it. Very expensive job just to change your cooling components, and they wear a lot. They're very problematic. Just when you thought you sorted out a coolant leak, which there's always many potentials in this vehicle, then all of a sudden you spring out an oil leak, oil pan gasket, valve cover gaskets. Then you get that sorted and take the car out from the shop and you just finish paying $3,000 to rectify that. Then all of a sudden you have another coolant leak. This time it's something else. That's the endless cycle with these cars, is on and off, one problem or the other, one problem or the other. It literally keeps the lights on for BMW dealers. But either way, I would stay away from an E60 or older 5 Series BMW. And the next little warhorse that I really recommend against, because I personally know 2 people that have had them and have struggled during every single day of ownership, and it's the BMW Mini, right, what we have right behind us here. But let's take a quick look, because people buy them because they appear to be attractive, unassuming, and sporty. They're also very retro. I mean, look at the taillights. How about the great little exhaust tip on there? Sometimes the S's, you get the dual mount in the center. Great little chrome accents. Beautiful little wheels. You've got all this great little plastic molding to keep the rocks off the paint, so the car wears very, very well. Beautiful oversized glass top and beautiful little retro mirrors. How about these little accents? Definitely has a lot of character. This whole car is painted and smeared in character. Beautiful bug eye headlights, very complex looking, probably very expensive to replace, as is this interesting little grille by Mini. Got little fog lights and great little accents on the hood. Makes this car look very, very retro and interesting to say the least. Now you'll notice if this one's tagged at 10 grand, in terms of US dollars, it's half that. And I've seen these as low as $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 too. But what about the interior? Actually quite well manufactured and very consistent with the BMW brand. You'll notice this one's a manual, which is the preferred way to go, because the CVT, which is the continuously variable transmission, is a flop. And when equipped with the CVT, there's lots of problems. But even the manual, the clutches are weak. I personally know someone who owns one, and they've had to do a clutch in theirs as well. But it's a bigger problem than just the CVT or the clutch in the manual like we have here. This would be the 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine. Wow, lots of problems. Timing chains is the worst one. That's the big problem you're going to contend with here. Rattle starts rattling and clinking like nuts and bolts in a metal garbage can. And if you ignore it long enough, bang! And that engine just goes poof, up in smoke. There's also lots of leaks, coolant, oil leaks, and you name it. Everything that BMW gets to enjoy from repair privileges, you also see in these cars. There's also lots of different electrical problems, and it's just like you see when you're talking about the 5 Series BMW, you get one problem fixed and another one pops up, it rears its ugly face. And with all of that said, you're probably going to want to check that video. It's going to help you purchase a vehicle potentially with some of the best engines out there today. Hope to see you real soon. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.